right, so let me introduce Valerie Leclair, who is the Vice President of Admissions Management and Marketing. Is that correct?
Enrollment Management and Marketing. Almost perfect.
Enrollment at Colby-Sawyer College in New London, New Hampshire, not to be confused with Colby College.
Correct.
It's a separate school.
Separate school.
That's in Maine.
Yes, Colby
Correct.
College is in Maine.
Colby's
We are
in Maine.
in New
You
London.
are Colby-Sawyer.
Yes.
How many students do you have at the school?
So roughly about 1,000 students with all of our, so that includes all of our undergraduate, graduate, professional studies, sort of all of those students combined are roughly about 1,000.
Right. And has it traditionally, it's about 100 years old, is that right?
Yes.
And it traditionally a liberal arts institution or any particular specialties that you're known for?
So now I would say it's changed certainly over the course of history. But right now we are very well known in the undergraduate space, really all the way through doctoral in nursing. So that's probably our largest program here. And then, we have great programs in business and psychology and sport management, exercise science, all of that. And so quite a few opportunities. And then we have some graduate programs as well.
Excellent. Excellent. So this is really an interesting cutting edge decision that the school has made. You are resetting the annual published tuition price from $46,000 to $17,500. Why did you decide as an institution to do that?
Sure. I think that, we had this conversation. So we implemented that. So the entering class of fall 2023, so last September, was the first class coming in on this new lower tuition. And certainly there's no surprise. The cost of higher ed is
outrageous
and increasing at sort of a rate that you just almost can't keep up with.
It seems as though it's going to be unsustainable.
Well, and it really is. I think I read the other day there was an institution, and I don't know what institution got to. One institution got to almost $100,000. That's crazy.
We're up into the 90s at this point, which is out of reach for even people who are doing very well in this country. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. And so, I think Colby-Sawyer had always really tried to ensure that families weren't taking on the brunt of that cost, offering scholarships and aid, of course. But I think we recognized that there was a real opportunity and there was a transparency that was needed to align our published price with our actual cost of what it might cost to attend the institution.
I would imagine, though, immediately anyone watching this thinks, well, you're a private college. How can you afford to do that? Do you have some massive endowment that rivals Harvard's? Like, what is the deal?
Yeah, well, it was several years of planning. It certainly wasn't a quick decision that we just decided to make. There was a concerted effort to strengthen the financial stability of the college. That included growing the endowment, increasing the number of donors. We have some really great partnerships, like a partnership with Dartmouth Health, which is the parent company of Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center.
Right. So they are invested in making sure there are more RNs every year, for instance.
Absolutely. Yes. We're the preferred partner for them. So it's really, they definitely want to see us succeed as well.
Sure.
And then, establishing new programs in, a really short span of time from 2018 until now, present day, we went from 1 graduate program to 11. And so all of that really allowed us to make this really bold move, right?
So let me clarify. So is the $17,500 tuition for undergraduates?
Yes.
So a lot of those graduate programs are kind of supporting this effort?
Yeah, so graduate programs just everywhere are sort of cost a different way, right? An undergraduate student is paying a tuition, right? Like one big cost, and it encompasses everything, all of their student services and fees and all of that. Whereas graduate students pay a cost per credit. And so it's typically much, much lower because they're really not looking they have, all of the same support services, but it's just a different model. And many of those programs are online, right?
And it's typically professional development. So these are people with a salary, with a career going, so they can afford to kind of do it piecemeal.
Yeah.
along the way.
Yes, exactly. These are students, the graduate students are pursuing often master's or doctoral degrees. So they're really looking for the next thing in their career. So yes, the $17,500, that tuition was for the undergraduate traditional model, right? So that high school senior coming in, to the college, and it really, I think, put us, all of those things put us in a good position to be able to make that promise to students. And it's been, now that we're in year 2 of that reset, it's been really, really well received from families and students.
Oh, I bet. And it aligns much more with the way it used to be. I'll give you an example from my own family across 3 generations. When my father attended Boston College, which was a small regional school in the 40s, his tuition was $200 a semester. In the 60s, when I come from a very big family, so my oldest brother was there in the 60s, it was $2,000. By the time I was there in the mid 80s, it was $24,000. So you see this massive tuition jump from the 60s to the 80s. And now it's, in the $80,000 range. So,
it really is.
Being in higher ed, explain to the average person, why was there this exponential spike in tuition costs that was so different from, say, the 40s through the 80s? Suddenly, from the 60s through the present time, we have just seen this graph up and to the right, and it's not stopping. Why?
Yeah, I think that, I think in the beginning, it was to really help those students, to raise, to increase tuition, so that the families could afford to pay it, would pay it, and then they could scholarship sort of more heavily the students that needed more assistance.
You were kind of paying for a student and a half, right?
Yes,
scholarship hits. And then it seems to me there began this building arms race among schools, particularly in the top 50 in America, where they realized that their infrastructure needed to keep pace with the Ivy Leagues, for instance, which were so much older and more established. Does Colby-Sawyer strive to kind of keep things under control in terms of expenses? Like, is that factoring into this ability to lower tuition?
So I feel like, nothing has changed. So this tuition did not impact any student service, anything that students had access to prior to the tuition reset, they still have access.
Wow. So that $30,000 reduction, that's being made up by these partnerships you talk about, like with Dartmouth Health and the graduate students paying full boat.
Well, not really. Let's be honest. So as you said, this high cost, right, of tuition right now, we're in this model of high tuition, high discount, but families don't know that. And so they're getting, when their high school senior applies to an institution like Colby-Sawyer, when we were roughly $63,000, they would get an academic scholarship of maybe $25,000 to $30,000. I
see, making the school more desirable for them.
So it's like, wow, they really value my child. They're giving them a $30,000. And so
you're kind of not doing that anymore under that model.
We are still giving scholarships for sure, but they have lowered, right? We're not it doesn't cost that much to come here anymore. And so we knew that offering academic merit is really important, and we couldn't not do that, and so we still absolutely do. It's just we went from maybe offering $20,000 to $30,000 to anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000.
Okay, let's stop right there. We're talking with Valerie Leclair from Colby-Sawyer College about the school's decision to lower tuition across the board this year. And when we come back, we'll talk about how it's going. So welcome back. We're speaking with Valerie Leclair, who's a vice president at Colby-Sawyer College, talking about their decision to lower their published tuition price. Now they've gone from $46,000 a year for an undergraduate to $17,500 a year, kind of readjusting the model of what it means to pay tuition for an undergraduate degree. Tell me, do you think that this lowering of the tuition across the board is also a way to increase diversity on your campus?
It absolutely will be a benefit of it. We often, students that are looking at colleges and higher education as an option when they're in high school. They might not even consider an institution that has, a price tag at $60,000. Certainly a private institution often fell out of reach. And, those areas that have a lower socioeconomic standing typically have more racial and ethnic diversity. And so, I think that I've had a lot of conversations this spring as students are in the process of making decision, and families that, that they wouldn't have even looked at us prior to that because they just felt that we were out of reach, and that, now we're not. And now they're thinking of actually attending here. So it really is a win-win.
And that's a benefit for the community overall. Right. Absolutely. That you're not getting just people who live in your area or in the New England area necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you seeing at the higher price, were you seeing a decline in enrollment in recent years?
So, we're all facing the same headwinds. Higher ed is, amidst a demographic cliff is what we're calling it.
Yes.
Where, 18 years ago, less people were having babies, and now there's less students to come to college.
Yeah.
And so, we've had some really strong years. COVID, then who knew, that was going to be another sort of curveball. Yeah. And so we definitely saw a some decreasing numbers. I think as many institutions, certainly in New England and across the United States have. But I'm really happy that, this year we're seeing some great increase. This is the second year.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because your background is in admissions. How long had you worked in admissions in your
So I sort of cut my teeth, if you will, in admissions. So I have been in admissions for over 25 years.
Oh, wow. So you really know what you're talking about. Yeah. So how have you seen change the admissions picture at Colby-Sawyer? Are applications up for the fall?
Yes, they are. So, I think the reset was a really important piece. It can't be the only thing you do, right? A tuition decrease or reset, as we like to call it, it's not going to automatically, say that that's going to increase enrollment. You need to do other things, but it's definitely...
Like what kinds of things?
Well, we've implemented, a lot of exciting things for our students. This year, we did an early acceptance program where students were able to come and get on the spot same day decisions. So that was really great. It was very well received. Just getting them engaged early. Yes. Yeah. But we have to be in higher ed. I think that's one of the reasons why I've stayed in it so long, is that things are always changing, whether it's institutionally or within, just the overall higher education, scheme and market. I just feel like there's always opportunity to kind of get it out there. And I think, Colby-Sawyer offers such a really great product for our students. It really is a great school. And I feel like the more we can get students to consider it, the more students will potentially make the decision to attend and have that experience here.
Sure. And no doubt, you're a small liberal arts institution in the Northeast. Yep. So this was workable for you, and people like you with such vast experience knew to give this advice. Do you think this is a workable solution for other private universities, or do you think really only small schools can pull this off?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. And certainly we're seeing more schools make this decision, right? It's not a lot, but it's more. And I do think that you
don't really hear of any school lowering their tuition. I gotta be honest. I just had my fourth one graduate from college. A lower price was never on the table.
All right. Well, I'm hoping that my daughter, that's a sophomore, will find a lower price.
Yeah. Something tells me she'll be at Colby-Sawyer.
Well, you never know.
You never know. But sorry. I got us off track.
It's okay.
Do you think other bigger private universities might?
I think they can. I think it takes planning, a lot of planning, and it's not going to be right for every institution. But I feel like perhaps smaller private institutions, I feel like I've, always seemed to work at a smaller private institution and can be sometimes a bit more nimble, be able to make
those
a
big
decision
schools.
And then make it happen a little bit faster. And so it's not to say that larger schools couldn't do it. I just think it's a lot of planning and conversation and making sure that everybody, sees the value and that.
Well, and a board of trustees that can see the vision. right?
Absolutely.
And sign off on something like this. Before you go, I do have to ask you about this demographic cliff. Yes. I mean, I have always worried that when this happens, we've got the aging baby boomers leaving us over the next 25 years. And then there is this cliff. I mean, I think a lot of small liberal arts schools might not survive. I mean, but what's going to be the higher ed picture overall? Are schools for the first time going to be fighting over the best students?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that they probably already are.
Yeah.
Which is part of this sort of, I think you had said arms race. I honestly sometimes use that same terminology. It's, it's really just kind of finding that, that right pitch or whatever, is going to do. But I do feel like, I read the other day, I think 1.5 schools close a week. That's a lot right now. And so more will come. Unfortunately, I think the cliff will accelerate that. And, at Colby-Sawyer, we feel really good about our financial, stability and where enrollment and our programs are going. And so at some point, you just have to kind of make sure that your institution is able to weather the storm. I think the president, the board of trustees, the leadership have made really smart decisions preparing for this. You can't, we've been preparing for years.
Yeah. What is the endowment, by the way, for Colby-Sawyer?
Oh, you're going to ask me. And it's around,
in a neighborhood.
I think it's around $68 to $70 million.
Okay. Which is healthy for a small New England school.
And honestly, over our president over the last 8 years has almost doubled it. So
because that's the biggest problem, right? When a school gets in trouble and they begin dipping into the endowment to pay operating costs, that's when you're really headed for closure, right? I mean, you've got to have a president and board of trustees who really know how to avoid doing that, correct?
And we're so fortunate here at Colby-Sawyer to have that great leadership.
That is great. And, what's your advice to parents? When they look now, it is deeply confusing for a lot of people about whether college is worth it or not. We're hearing that conversation for the first time in the history of our country, and which school to choose. Is all this money going to pay off in the end? You're a parent. You've been in higher ed for 25 years. What's your advice to high school parents as they begin to look? I
think there are so many great options out there for students. And I think sometimes students focus on the big names and the Ivies. And there are, I tell my own child, you can get a great education at so many institutions. And so it's really just about, finding the right fit, and doing the visits and asking your questions so that you can really have all that information in front of you and make the best decision, both financially, but also, for that student, they're going to want to be part of that community for the next 4 years. Right. And there are so many great schools out there. I'm happy Colby-Sawyer is one of them. And just to hang in there. That's what I say to parents, just like hang in there.
It's true. And as we used to always say to our kids, you can always transfer. Right. If after that first year you realize this was a big mistake, there is time to change.
There is like nothing. And I think so many kids put such pressure on knowing what they want to be when they grow up.
Oh, listen, kids, the parents put pressure on kids to know that.
True. Yeah, it is. And so there's plenty of time for that, so it's all just kind of take it one step at a time. And you'll find a fit that's right for you.
That's excellent. Well, Valerie Leclair from Colby-Sawyer College, we really appreciate this. This is a fascinating decision your school has made. So glad that it's going well. And I'm sure it's going to make a lot of headlines. And we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.